I've done many Christian book review videos, but I can't always necessarily recommend them. And that has left comment after comment. Faith, what is a book that you would recommend? What are some good Christian reads? And today I'm going to share with you the ultimate list of life-changing Christian books, most of which you have not heard of. Let's begin. Now, there are some Christian books that everybody recommends, like the Bible, for instance, or Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis, or Counterculture, David Platt, Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper, The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and that's just to name a few. But I wanted to step out from some of those videos that have already been made on YouTube. You can go watch those and add my personal flair of once you've gotten past some of the big top Christian popular books, what are some good Christian living books? And some of these I wouldn't even completely classify as Christian living, but I think you guys get the gist. So my number one all-time favorite book, I just read it when I was in high school and it absolutely changed my life and set me on a trajectory to do what I do today. And that is How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. I've recommended this book a million times and I will continue to recommend this book a million times. This is like the best book I've found on beginner introduction to hermeneutics, how to exegete, or just like read and treat the scriptures faithfully. And it has a more updated cover, but it is by Fee and Stewart. This book is just a really great deep dive into getting you to think about how you read the Bible and like what are your presuppositions or your preconceived ideas of what you expect to read in the Bible when you just crack it open, and getting you to think about that. I unpack a lot of the stuff that they talk about in this book in my Bible study boot camp. Of course, I add to it. I go in different directions and things like that. But if you are a book reader, I would recommend How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Fee and Stewart. And in that same vein, once you've read that one and you still want to learn more, I would recommend these two books, Misreading the Scripture with Western Eyes by Richards and O'Brien, and then also Let the Reader Understand by McCartney and Clayton.
Clayton.
Both of these are also good reads. They're harder reads, or they're just like longer and a little bit more in depth and maybe a little less entertaining, but they're definitely like the next step if you are wanting to read about hermeneutics and like how to approach the Bible and treat it faithfully. Now, before we move to like more inherently Christian living books, I would also recommend two books that have really helped me with understanding specific aspects of the Bible as a literary book, because it does use literary elements like metaphors or themes throughout it. Two books that have really helped me that I think about often, and that's really how I value my books is, you know, I can read a book and be like, that was so good, but if I don't ever think about it again, it really wasn't that good, you know? It just made me feel good. Books that really stick with me, that come to mind, that I reference for years and years to come, those are the books that have made it to today's video. The two books that I would recommend on that note. The first one is Paul and First Century Letter Writing. This completely changed my mindset and understanding of the epistles, all of the letters in the New Testament, and how they happened or could have happened. And it goes through all the different processes of a secretary, how it was passed on, taken to the churches, passed on through the churches, all of those things. It really pushed my buttons and made me ask uncomfortable questions in like a good way. So I would recommend that if you really enjoy reading the epistles and you've always kind of wondered about how they were compiled, shared, all of the things. Okay, I think this is the last book I've recommended before, but has honestly changed my life, and I read this in the last year, is God of All Things by Andrew Wilson. I am now an Andrew Wilson fangirl, and I'm slowly making my way through all of Andrew Wilson's publications. God of All Things walks you through different metaphors and symbolism throughout the Bible. So you got like salt, pigs, rain, birds. Y'all know I dog ear my pages when I read something good. And as you can see, the whole book was good. I'm probably gonna reread this soon because there's just so many pages that look like this. Wow. Here's another. Wow. Wow. Amen. Gold. Wow. Amen. For my Christian living books, most recently, I have read Kelly Kapick's You're Only Human. And Kelly Kapick, his name's Kelly, but it's a he. He was my professor at Covenant College. I loved him as a professor. Most of my favorite memories of like sitting in a classroom and my mind being blown were in his classrooms. Reading is a little bit different. He's not as easy to consume in his reading, but it is so good and so rich. So if you guys can't tell, I dog-eared a lot. It's just a very holistic approach to understanding our humanity in the midst of to-do lists, in the midst of our sin, in the midst of our limits, not feeling loved, not feeling like enough, like all of those things. So the subtitle to You're Only Human is How Your Limits Reflect God's Design and Why That's Good News. He talks about things like our identity, humility, time, our involvement in the church with other people, our finitude, limits of the body, all of those things. So whether you are currently homebound with a sickness, currently just feel like there's not enough hours in the day if you're like me, or you just feel like you're not measuring up to what you feel like you ought to be or do, this is definitely a book I would recommend for you. And there will be times probably that you're not like 100% sure you're tracking, and that is okay. And I say this because I know a lot of people in my audience don't have like theological degrees. I took this man as a student, and there were some times where I was like, I think I'm tracking, I'm not 100% sure. And that is okay, like keep plowing because it's so worth it. And I think this is a good entry-level book into deeper theological reads while still being like a thin Christian living. It's like a good middle ground. It's not too simple and it's not too hard of a read. So I think it might stretch some people in a really good way. And he talks just about so many good, deep theological concepts that you won't get in those entry-level Christian living books. The next book that I want to recommend to you guys is Tim Keller's book on prayer. This is another one of those books that I read, let's see, almost a decade ago, and I still think about it like at least once a week. It's just a really good overarching introduction to thinking and talking about prayer theologically, and then the power of prayer, what prayer does, how to pray, all of those things. And I know I get so many comments every single day and emails about how to pray and all of that I want to recommend Tim Keller's book on prayer. Oh wow, my grandma bought me this book. Oh, that makes it even more impactful. It just really helped me, even though I was not necessarily a baby Christian, work out some things that I didn't know I needed to work out in my theology around prayer. So Tim Keller's book on prayer, really enjoy it. And it's one of those books that even after listening to hours and hours and hours of lectures around prayer and our theology around prayer and teaching on prayer myself, I still think back to this book all the time. When it comes to womanhood and my reads around being a woman of God, I highly recommend, if you're like in any form of ministry or if you are in a church, to read Worthy by Elise Fitzpatrick and Eric Schumacher. The amount of times that I dog-eared the pages should tell you. It wrecked my world, but also was everything I was looking for in a book. And I actually was recommended it in my comments. It was just a really good handling of all the different struggles, nuances of women's roles in the church and wrestling through it. And there were times when I thought they were going to end up on the other end of the spectrum than what they did. So they're complementarians. There were times where they were writing and I was like, you guys are sounding a lot like an egalitarian. What's going on? And knowing that, you know, that they were going to end up complementarian, it was just a really good wrestling if you are a woman struggling with those roles, or if you're a man and you take any standpoint on how women should be involved in the church. So Worthy by Elise Fitzpatrick and Eric Schumacher. For motherhood, I highly suggest Missional Motherhood. All right, you're bound to have a little bit longer of a reading list now. Make sure to leave in the comments your book recommendations that you want me to read and review. I'll be doing that soon. And you've got to make sure you've seen me read the top 4 Christian living books of 2022 and give you my reviews. I was really surprised. I'll see you right there.